Hello and welcome on Beautiful People today. My guest is a musician. Please welcome sitar player and composer Anoushka Shankar, who has a new album out, Traveller, and is traveling across India these days, isn't it? With that album performing live. Anushka, lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you, good to be here.
You're back performing live, I think, in India after two and a half years. The last time you were here was with Tal, isn't it? Was that the last
No, that was
one?
years ago. I did a series of classical concerts with my father in 2010 spring, so that was almost 2 years ago.
So 2 years ago, how does it feel to be back performing
it's so
here?
lovely. It's so lovely to be back, especially with this album that's you know, a crossover between Indian music and flamenco, and we've been presenting it in Europe for a few months now. So it feels so important to then come and do the parallel and present it here in India, and so I'm really excited to be back.
I remember meeting you previously when you did Rise. That was your first album, I think, as composer.
As a composer, yeah.
Yeah. So when you did Rise, I remember we speaking about the fact that there was one track there, I think, called Voice of the Moon, and you said that there are some tracks which are great to perform live. You know, because they offer you great energy and sort of excitement among the musicians who are performing at that moment. So on this album, Traveller, would I be right in saying that this Buleria con Ricardo must be the track that's really exciting to perform live?
Yes, it's definitely one of the highlights that people seem to really respond to, and is a lot of fun for us because it's a very driven, very rhythmic track. But also, I kind of have taken all of the tracks from this album that we perform live and have really reworked them a bit so that we're not reproducing them exactly as on the record. And so they do all have a really interesting live energy, and the band that I'm with are so particularly brilliant that they bring that energy to every piece, really.
Flamenco music is the music of the gypsies, isn't it?
Of Spain, yes.
Of Spain,
yes.
And of the gypsies, is there a gypsy association?
There
to
absolutely
flamenco?
is. The gypsy community in Spain is largely what dominates the flamenco tradition, and so even today, you know, it is the music of the gypsies, but you will have non-gypsy musicians. However, really the strong areas that flamenco music develop are, for example, Seville, Madrid, Barcelona, where the gypsy communities are strong. And it is really their music. And in fact, that gypsy connection is one that traces all the way back to India, from the nomadic peoples from Rajasthan and beyond that traveled across Central Asia, the Middle East, and landed up in Spain. And so that was what I was really interested in retracing on this album.
In fact, Traveller, which is the title track, has... Would I be right if I interpret it as saying that, you know, it has a very folk Indian sound to it?
Absolutely.
Less Spanish flamenco, or how does it
well,
work? Explain it to the layperson.
Well, I didn't. That's an interesting point you brought up, because what I didn't want to do was go and just make a flamenco album, because I'm an Indian musician, I'm a sitar player. There are a million flamenco musicians who could make a better flamenco album than I would make. So what I was interested in making was a collaboration between Indian music and flamenco, and to allow these two styles to interact with each other in different ways, to create new sounds. So some of the pieces on the album are ones in which I travel completely over to the flamenco side and have, you know, developed techniques on the sitar to match flamenco guitar and so on.
So Inside Me would be, the first track, would that be?
Yeah, it's definitely more in the flamenco vein. Or Caña, in fact, is something that's very much in a famous old flamenco style. And then in the other pieces, it's about coming in the other direction and having, for example, Spanish musicians or rhythms, but presenting more of an Indian piece. And then the third is, of course, when the two styles combine and end up in a place that's not quite one or the other, and that's very interesting as well.
And which track do you think it best, brings that out?
I would say Boy Meets Girl is a very interesting one. It's deceptively simple in the sense that it's just a duet between sitar and guitar, which is played by a great master, Pepe Abituela. But it was actually a very complex track to create, because we were trying to allow two simultaneous forms to exist at the same time, one being the presentation of an Indian raga and one being a form called the granaína from flamenco. And we had to work quite hard to find a way to make that work, but as it stands, if you were just listening, it just sounds like a very simple, beautiful melody, but actually it's two very old styles that are completely separate, being able to coexist.
flamenco is music that I think you've liked for a while, but this is the first time that you're working with it and helping use that to create your music, isn't it? What kind of effort goes into putting an album like this together? I mean, when does the thought happen, and then to get the musicians together, decide on the pieces that will then, get combined to be an album? How does it work?
A lot of that process is the same regardless of what one is working on. There's a creative process that isn't formulaic and involves a bit of luck and a bit of touch and go, that some days things are happening very quickly, all the pieces are happening without needing any work done to them because they seem to come out perfect. And then there's other things that are very challenging and involve lots of work, lots of change. But when you throw in a situation like this, the fact that it's two different traditions coming together, then it's a whole other level of challenge and excitement, because there's an interesting dialogue that has to happen between people in order to make the music. So in this case, I was working with musicians who were completely foreign to me in a nationalistic sense and in a musical sense. We didn't speak the same language, we weren't from the same place, but also our music, we didn't really understand each other.
And did you have to physically share the same space, at least for some time? Because, the musicians and albums these days can happen separately in different places and then
we
come
did
together.
Both. I mean, there was a lot of work that was done remotely around the world, but I predominantly recorded the album in Spain. And I did that because I wanted to immerse myself and be in that culture. And so there was a lot of kind of sitting down and working with musicians before even any recording happened, where I wanted to learn about the styles, learn about the rhythms, had to do a lot of practice to kind of develop, techniques that we'd spoken of. So it was a real challenge, actually, but a very exciting one.
It took you, what, about a year?
Under a year, yeah.
So as long as it took you to make a baby?
Pretty much exactly, yeah, pretty much exactly.
As much fun?
It's a difficult question because they were so linked, I mean, I found out I was pregnant right when I started working on the record, and I mixed the record about 10 days before I had Zubin, so it was such a linked experience for me that being pregnant was inspiring a lot of the music I made, and making the album was influencing the state of my pregnancy. So for me, it's hard to separate.
It happened at the same time. Yeah. The other thing about Traveller that I found interesting is that I think there were at least 3-4 pieces which have vocals. Isn't it?
More actually. Yeah.
So more than So there's Ishq, there's Krishna, of course, and then there is
there's Inside Me, Si no puedo verla, Casi uno, Kanya.
That's new for you, isn't it? Though the Kashkari album, I think, did have singers,
Rise and Breathing Underwater both had progressively more vocals on them. And so I felt, due to those two experiences, quite comfortable working with vocals. And it made sense for a lot of the songs to have vocals on this album, because both Indian music and flamenco give a lot of prominence to songs. And so I'm an instrumentalist, but I totally love and concede the importance of the human voice, and I think I've always loved writing, and so to be able to express myself through lyrics is also something very beautiful.
Do you think that people find it easier to relate to music that has vocals in it?
Certainly, I think
it makes it easier, isn't it?
It makes it easier for more listeners to relate and understand, and that makes perfect sense. The voice is the most universal of any instrument. It's the most primal, it's the most connectable. That's not a word, but it is the most connectable.
But I think it conveys what you mean, so it's okay.
For me, I think instrumental music is very interesting because it leaves a little bit more to interpretation. So a listener needn't know my experience in order to have their own experience. But vocals and lyrics tend to help people connect to what you're trying to say, of course. So it is easier, isn't it?
It's easier. Okay, so I remember the last time we met, I remember that when it came to talking about your father, Pandit Ravi Shankar, you said how you know that there are a closet full of questions that you're used to, okay, where he's concerned. When we met last, you must have been 25, 26, you're now about 30. So time has passed. Do you still get confronted with those questions? Are they still coming?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, no, they absolutely do. And to an extent, I have absolutely no problem with that, because he is and always will be that same huge part of my story that he was then. So for that to be something asked about and for me to share is very important to my story. You know, he is my guru, he's my father, he's my teacher. So
you know, you said at that time, and I found that something that stayed with me. You said while you acknowledge the fact that you've received the music from him, both as a teacher and as a parent, it is now mine. You know, and this is what you said. It is mine now, and I play it because I love it. In the past 5-6 years, since the last time I spoke to you, which is when you released Rise, has your musical career become acknowledged as an independent musical career? Are you now talking more about your music and less about your family and your father?
well, asking me what I talk about depends on the interviewer and the publication and whatever it is, really. So
okay, so let me rephrase that.
But as far as my career goes, I think I've noticed in the last couple of years a shift where I feel quite happy with the way my career is perceived. It feels like people know me as an artist and as a composer and as a musician. More and more people know what I'm about, what kind of music I make. And again, like we touched on earlier, and my father is a part of that story, a huge part of that story. But it seems that that I'm known as an artist in a different way now, perhaps.
How is he doing? He's 92 now.
He'll be 92 in April.
And he's still performing?
He's still performing.
That's lovely.
It's incredible. I don't know anyone like him. It's he's a real inspiration. His shows at the moment seem to just speak so soulfully and so wisely. You know, I mean, to speak with that life experience as a musician at 91, 92 and to be performing his expressionism and his technique, I mean, it's unlike anything,
but it's
really.
quite strenuous to do live performances, to play the sitar, to sit like that.
Absolutely.
I mean, physically, does that take a toll? How does he cope with that?
I mean, he's an inspiration on many counts. I mean, just to be that age and to be performing, regardless of what you end up playing, but just to be on stage and just to be... I think he's an extraordinarily dedicated and passionate and committed man, you know.
But is it difficult physically to sort of
it's
to
difficult
work?
for me.
Yeah,
I find it difficult. You know, at the end of a show, I feel tired. I find
that's what I'm getting
physically that it's taxing. So, I mean, he doesn't make sense in a lot of ways. I can just say he's an inspiration.
So you stop trying to
I
figure
can't
it
make
out.
sense of him. No.
You referred to your son Zubin. He's going to be a year old, I think, in a few weeks' time. What do you think you want to do in the way you bring him up? Because you've had a childhood and a life which has always been in the spotlight, isn't it? I mean, you started playing the sitar publicly, I think, when you were 12, 13?
Yeah.
You know, so, and then, of course, thanks to your father. And Zubin will have, again, a set of parents, mother and father, who are celebrated professionals and artists. So is there, now that you've grown up and you're a parent, is there something that you may want to do differently?
Well, I don't know the answers as far as the public element of it. But I can speak more on the artistic side of it, because that's what's important.
Yeah.
You know, should he want to be a musician and perform, then there's a public element that will come along with it. That's secondary. The point is the actual music or the art or whatever he's interested in. And that one, I find it very intimidating and very scary and very exciting, to be a parent, because on one side, I obviously do want to share all these amazing things with him that I've been given and that have given me so much. And I'm also wary of putting him in that sort of cliche situation of pressure and being forced. So I think the best we can do is to kind of be ourselves and raise him in our lives, and he will undoubtedly be exposed to so much art and so much
like you were.
Yeah, like I was. And should he show any interest, then that'd be amazing, and I'd love to share it
You know where
with
to
him.
go.
Yeah. I think, it's not a question of, like, in any way having a design about who he's going to be or what he's going to do, but like anyone, you raise your kids as who you are. You bring in your life, your tastes, your loves, and who we are artists, musicians,
And it can't be
filmmakers,
premeditated, I get that.
No.
But I guess what I was trying to find out is, when you were growing up, you led a transcontinental life. You were the only child, Your father was much older, so you know you had an unusual childhood and growing up in life in that sense. So when you bring up baby, when you bring up your baby, are there things that you would like to do differently?
Well, his life is certainly unconventional already. I mean, he was born in the States, and at 2 months old, he moved to London. He's already been to 9 countries, and he's not even a year old. You know, he's been on tour, he's been on film sets. But that's normal for us, you know. So it's difficult to quantify what normal is, because we can't bring him up as somebody else's child. So we just have to see who he is, really. As he grows up and as he starts to display his own interests or character traits, then as parents we'll do everything we can to give him what he needs, whatever that is, really.
I'm sorry, I know he's just too young right now for you to even perhaps think of these things.
I know the amount of questions I get about what do you think he's going to be, and I'm like, I think he's not even walking yet.
Not what he's going to be, but you know, because it's like, are there things that you would want to do differently because you've had a certain kind of experience? You know, all of us think that when we can shape things, we might do it differently.
I think you know we might have designs and desires as far as. Being a parent, we all have a perfect idea of how we're going to do it the best and how we're going to do it differently. And this kind of short year of being a parent has kind of taught me that you can't really have expectations, because they get blown out of the water by the reality of it anyway, you know. I don't know the first thing about anything is what I've learned. And so you've just got to take it one day at a time, and you know, it's about who he is, and so it'll change as he develops, really.
You know, I remember when I heard Rise, and that thought still persists with me, that I see or hear your music and I see images very often. So the inevitable question again, to compose for a film, and now that you can collaborate at home on a film, so is that something, you know, that's on the cards?
Nothing is on the cards. I definitely would be curious to write music for the right film at some point, even if it's just one, but to have that experience, I'd love to do it. But I don't feel a burning desire about it either. So it's one of those, if it happens, then great. But
you didn't act again after Dance Like a Man, did you?
No.
So you were open to the idea?
I was, but I don't think I am anymore. It's kind of left me knowing that I didn't feel any passion for it, you know. And I think it's an art form like any other that needs people to have that love and dedication for it, to do it well. And I don't feel the same way about it that I do about music, let's say. So.
So what happens next? More cities in India?
More cities in India. When we finish here, we move to North America, South America, Australia. We're touring traveler, traveling along.
So a musician can never travel light, and now that the musician is a mother, does that mean you travel with the baby and all his paraphernalia?
It's crazy. When I'm on holiday with him, I'm really good at traveling very light, actually, it must be said. But it's interesting how, as a mum, your stuff just goes down to make room for the baby stuff. I carry nothing now for myself. But on tour, I still need what I need. But yeah, it's a bit ridiculous how much you need for a baby.
You're in a good space?
Incredibly. Yeah, really.
Anoushka Shankar, we wish you all the best.
Thank
Always
you very
lovely
much
talking
indeed.
to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.